Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tyler Nicolette with Amplify Advisors. Wish we could interact, but we all know in the new format here that we're using with Zoom is a little bit less formal, and we're using the chat function for our communication as our main medium, and we'll work through that as our session starts, and we get into what we want to talk about today, which is on leadership. And it's been a steadfast topic in our Amplify AHA with Amplify series. It's something I think all of us can never get enough of. There's, I think, 70,000 books on Amazon on leadership, and so many different rabbit holes to go down, so many great experts to learn from. I know I've been doing a lot of that in my lifetime, and really, really honored to have Erin Ekman join us today. That I think we connected way back in the blur of 2020, Erin, and on a webinar similar to this, and just had a great connection. Loved her language and the type of leadership style that she was coaching and developing with her business and what she did for her profession. And we've stayed connected ever since. And the opportunity to bring her in for this session was incredible for us, and I'm honored to have her and us as Amplify. I know I'll gush over your expertise here, then you can tell me all the goods of why you do it, Erin. But I know she's a competitor. She has a great high-level athletic background. She's a certified professional coach. She's certified emotional intelligence practitioner. She's a leadership consultant with Centrivity. She's a senior associate with LeaderSharp Group, an organization committed to raising the collective consciousness, capability, and impact of today's leaders through training, development, leadership development, executive coaching, and strategic design for mid and large size organizations. How does that sound?
That sounds great. I appreciate that I don't have to say all those things about myself.
I'll let you keep going. Yeah. She's worked in North America, Asia Pacific, Europe. I know she's got lots of experience here locally in our Alberta economy and city of Calgary. With respect to turning it over to her, that'll happen in a moment here. But I think some of you that have participated in the past, there's CPD at the end of this session. So 60 minutes, we will, if you have to leave for another meeting or what have you, we will send you a CPD certificate. There'll be a recording. There'll be follow-up within a week or so. And thankful to Nikki for all the things behind the scene that she's done. She'll be looking after that for us. And some of the chats and the polls, you'll see messages in the group chat here come up in a minute. But I'd like to turn it over to Erin to tell us her why.
Thanks, Tyler. I so appreciate being here, and I'm really honored that you would ask me to present on a topic like this. Just like you said, there's 70,000 books out there on leadership and lots of different perspectives and voices on the topic. And so I just appreciate that you would give me this opportunity to speak to your community on how I coach, how I live leadership, how I learn about leadership. And you're, exactly right that we had this connection in a similar forum, looking at how can we support entrepreneurs and business owners and people with great ideas out there. And then the more that we started to connect and learn about our approach, our philosophy, number one is just as people, but also as leaders in the community, we definitely had some synergies there, and we never have there's never a loss of things for us to talk about. And so I'm always excited when I get to connect with you. So thanks again for having me here.
You're very welcome.
So in terms of how, I'm going to tell you about who I am, and then also about how we're going to walk through this time together today. And just like Tyler said, it's an interesting sort of format platform here when I get to see Tyler's face and I get to see Nikki's face, but I don't get to see all of you and who's here. And as a coach, as a facilitator, that's what gives me energy. That's what tells me what's landing, what's not, if people are engaged. And so, what I'm going to ask of you, all of that are participating today and listening in and watching this, is to use the Q&A. And I'm going to have some interactive pieces for you as well. But please engage through the Q&A, whether it's just a comment or you have a question for us. That helps us sort of steer the conversation to make it valuable for you. So in terms of who I am, like Tyler said, he shared some of the work that I do, but I'll also share with you some of my background. So I do come from athletics. And initially, when I was going to university, I thought I absolutely want to work in high performance sport. I did my Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology here in Calgary, and worked alongside some of the top sports scientists and physiologists, and had this great passion for human performance and human potential. And so I thought that was the world that I wanted to live and work in for the rest of my life. And I spent nearly 8 years working in high performance sport in Canada. Loved every minute of it because it was fascinating to see the theory of human performance and practice come to life. What I discovered along the way, though, was that what I really was good at was connecting with people and helping the individual work towards what was most important for them. So set those goals to really help, create space for people to be heard. And so what I decided to do was move from sort of the strategy of sport into more work around people development. And so that's when I moved into coaching and executive coaching. And so it seems sometimes like a big leap going from sports science and physiology into the work that I do now with teams and organizations. But really, it is just that continued passion for helping people and businesses reach that potential of where they can go. And so how leadership is tied into that. Interestingly enough, I never really saw myself as a leader until I would say even sort of 5 or 6 years ago when I started a new practice. I'd been working in people development and leadership development or team development for since 2009. And it really wasn't until I would say the last sort of 5 or 6 years that I started to recognize that really what the work I was doing and how I was showing up in the world was that I was being a leader. And I think that's so similar for many of us, where we don't, if we haven't been given the title as leader, we may not recognize that we actually are leaders in our own right. And the way that I see it, and I'd love to get Tyler's perspective on this too, is that if we have influence over another person or a system or a community, then we are leaders. And it's our responsibility to actually take responsibility for that, for our influence and our impact on others, and do something great with that. And so that's how I start to see this tie in between the work that I do in leadership development. Is it's really about, number one, as an individual, can you see that you have impact and influence? And then what are you doing every single day to make sure that that is the right impact? That is the impact that you want to make on the world around you. So that's part of how we're going to have this conversation today. So Tyler, just curious about your thoughts on that in terms of you as a leader, how you saw yourself as a leader. Maybe you always have, but love to hear your thoughts.
I love the perspective and the tie-in with the athletic background. I'm always biased to somebody with that sporting background and what they've had to do to show up for themselves before others. So there's lots to unpack with that comment. And I think that's where the our shared language comes from, for sure, from that foundation. Leadership, I mean, over my time, I'm 25 years in business, call it. I've seen a very authoritative type style, previous years, do this, do it that way, pretty structured, to lots of different coaching elements that seem to resonate with me a lot more, because I was probably more in tune with working on myself first before I even knew it. And it just started to evolve from there. And, the epistemological model, if you will, of knowledge is power, learning more, going back to 70,000 books on Amazon, that's incredible, but it's not just one way. There's so many different ways. And that's why I find this so fascinating, because I don't think there's one person on this earth that can take the term leadership and give the exact same definition of what that means. And I love where you're going with where it starts with you first. So I believe in that.
Excellent. All right, then I'm confident we're going to have a great conversation today. All right, so I'm going to share some slides with you today so that you can follow along. And again, use the chat function at any point in time. Tyler's going to keep an eye on it and make sure that if there's anything relevant to what we're talking about in the moment, we're going to bring it into the conversation.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So Tyler, you can let me know if you can see my screen.
There it is. Yes.
Okay, excellent. So again, we're talking about leadership today. I'm very happy to be here. It's such an honor to speak to all of you and have this conversation. So what we're going to cover today, I'll give you a bit of an agenda. And I said this to Tyler maybe 3 minutes before we had everybody come in the room. And I said, I might just throw it all out the window. So that's a bit of my style, is to say, let's prepare in advance, let's have an agenda. But I think what's so much more impactful is to be real and authentic in the moment. If we're on a flow and it feels like we're talking about something that is very powerful and we're getting lots of feedback from you too, we're going to keep running with it. But here's the plan so far. We do want to dig into these things with you today.
So we'll tee up a fireside chat in the future, Erin. We'll do that live and have a different level of engagement.
Sounds fantastic. Yeah, I'd love that. All right, so what we will cover. So we're going to talk about, set the context, we're talking about leadership and where it's come from and where it's going. So how has leadership, and just even like Tyler said, is that noticing how this authoritative commanding style leadership and that influence on how he thought about leadership, how that's showing up, how that's shifting, and the kind of leadership that we're seeing that we're needing to grow into the future to be most effective, whatever role that you're playing, whatever position that you hold, where we need to grow into to be effective as a community and as a culture. And why is leadership an inside job first? So this idea of shifting from thinking about the doing of leadership to actually being able to match what our future needs are by doing the internal work. So again, those 70,000 books out there all have their different ideas about what is leadership and how we can become better leaders. But it's not about the doing on the external, it's about what we're doing on the inside that really counts and is going to make those changes. We're also going to talk about why organizations with emotionally intelligent leaders are more successful than those that are not. And there's great data to prove that they actually are. We're going to talk about what is emotional intelligence and how can you grow that within you, and that is something that you can develop over time, which is keeps me employed and makes me very optimistic about how we can shape our communities and our organizations because of the work that we can do as individuals. All right, so let's start to set that context for the future of leadership. So there's a note here that you can see on the slide that says our old tools are no longer effective in a new world of work. So without talking about, the last 2 years, the last 3 years, we all know we've gone through a tremendous amount of change, and the way that we work and how we work effectively with each other and as leaders and as team members has been turned upside down. We're in another really interesting transition point of learning how to take what we loved about the last couple of years, what we learned was actually really effective for us as team members, as leaders, as organizations, and blending it with this getting back to what we used to know and what used to be effective. And so it's really turned organizations upside down in terms of thinking about, well, what is best for our people? How can we still be successful and reach our financial targets, these goals that we set, strategic goals that we have for ourselves, and honor the fact that there are people who want to work differently now and feel like they have a voice in that. So how can we lead people in this new way of work, which is still in transition? So what we do know is that our old way of thinking, our old operating systems, the old tools that we were using to effectively manage and lead people are no longer working. And the new tools that we need in order to be effective are ones that require us to be different human beings. And we're going to talk more about what that means in just a bit. But that is the scary work. That is also the very exciting work that's ahead of us. A great opportunity for us all to lean in a different way that's going to help us be better, not just as individuals, but as teams and organizations. So in this new world of work, and this is not an extensive list, so I'm going to give you some of the things that I see most commonly in the leaders that I work with and the teams that I've been working with. These are the most challenging pieces for leaders today. And I'm sure that you can add more to this. And if you've got something to add, please add it into the Q&A for us. So top challenges for today's leaders. All right, so we'll just talk through this from top to bottom. Managing expectations of different stakeholders. So leaders today are having to manage expectations from whether you consider your stakeholders to be your clients. You may have a board of directors. You may have different shareholders that are not even on the board, but maybe they hold both positions. You may have people that are lenders, buyers. And so this idea of managing this complex nature of your stakeholders and their wants and desires of you as a leader. So I know leaders who are constantly trying to manage this pleasing and doing the right thing for everyone. And that's a lot of weight to carry. It's a lot of complexities and sometimes even conflicting priorities and expectations that they have to manage. Leaders are both working on running the business and transforming it. So what's expected of leaders in terms of the kind of environment that they're expected to create while doing the work inside the business, understanding the operations of the business. Again, sometimes those are in conflict of each other, also just require very different ways of thinking, different parts of your brain, different ways of engaging into the business, into the team. So holding those two things that can sometimes be in opposition as well. Trying to honor the range of needs. So honoring work-life balance, request for flex time, request for remote work, blended work. And so trying to honor the fact that people have different needs. You would not have seen that, or the expectation wouldn't have been there in the same intensity 25, 30 years ago. You know, when we think about leaders and expectation at work, well, you just come to work, you do your job, you show up on time, you show up 9 to 5. We have such a variety of needs, and we actually are starting to honor the fact that individuals do their best work when they can be valued as who they are and what they need. And it doesn't always fit in a nice little box. So again, leaders having to hold that space and wanting to hold that space for the employees because they want them to be happy. They want them to show up to work as their best self every day. That's another responsibility, another complexity that they have to manage. You also see navigating changes on this list. And so again, the last couple of years, but even previous to that, we're just recognizing that the speed of change, the rate of change is becoming faster and faster. So if you don't have somebody, either a leader, whether you're talking about yourself or somebody that you work for, if they don't have the capacity to navigate change, to have the tools and the skills and the awareness on how to do that well, that can be very taxing for leaders. This point about the world becoming more complex and interconnected, there's incredible value in the fact that we are a global community. We have access to things and people and resources that we never did before. That also adds a level of complexity. It also influences the speed of change, the interconnectedness that we all experience. That's hard for a leader to hold in their mind all of the time. This fact that we are so interconnected that every great decision and poor decision has a tremendous impact, not just on what's happening right in front of you right now, but this flow, this wave that it creates to everything that we can touch. Leading diverse teams. So this plays into also recognizing that we, as a global community, we have access to great talent that don't just live and work right beside us. So multicultural teams, we have teams that are working remotely in other countries and other cities. So how do we manage that? The simplicity of communicating one-on-one or with a team of people that work in the same office, that seems like a thing of the past. Mm-hmm. So recognizing that there's another level of complexity, while it adds great value to a team, becomes much harder for a leader to hold on to and manage well. Developing trust and inspiring others. So this one's at the bottom, but we could actually put that at the very top as being one of the most important things and most challenging things that a leader has to face, is how do we build trust? So how do we lead people if they do not trust us? And how do they build trust with us if they don't sit beside us and see us and connect with us on a daily basis? So this is just a small list of the challenges that leaders face today, and how that's influencing, again, how these old tools and these old systems that we used to use to build leaders are no longer working. And the point I want to drive home about this is it's not just about each of these individual challenges, it's about the interconnection between these challenges. So this is why there are 70,000 books out there on leadership and no one way of doing this, because it is so incredibly complex. And that's why when we think about, am I a leader? Or do I even want to be a leader? Is because it's a huge responsibility to take on, and it's not an easy path if you choose to do so. It's not for the faint of heart. But what I can say is that anyone who's ever stepped into a leadership position or recognizes that the influence they have on others as a leader does so because they care. They care about the world around them. They care about making things better in their own community. You may even consider yourself as a leader as a parent, because you are, and part of your family unit, whatever that may look like. We do this, we step into this world of being a leader because we care and it matters to us. So this is just part of how I want to frame out where we're moving towards in leadership development, how this has shifted and changed. And Tyler, I'd love to hear just thoughts as I'm showing you the challenges for leaders today.
Well said. And I love that you said you could put developing trust and inspiring others first. I think that gets to that transformational leadership that we're all going through today. And this is a very complex job. And, you know, a leader's source of power is if others choose to follow, you know, so you have to pull in so much in this complex world, but, you know, you have to, you know, create that space for yourself first. But I love how you've just gone through this and reverse engineered that last final point to drive this home. This is not an easy job. And you say trust, and you say care, you know, it makes me think of that authentic side to people sometimes, where people are, you know, in a leadership role, whether it's a parent, sports, business, when you become, you know, very authentic with your inauthenticities, if you will, and you do that in front of a group that you're leading, and you show them that you do care. However, you are not perfect. You don't have all the answers. It's completely fine to be that. And I think that's where the trust builds. So just to piggyback on some of that.
Yeah.
One area.
Yeah. And so I'd love to hear even your perspective of, like, in terms of how you've seen leadership change in the last 10 to 20 years. Maybe you have some examples from sport as well, and how you've seen yourself shift and change as a leader in the last few years.
Yeah, well, it goes back to when I was saying, you know, knowledge is power. I always thought, you know, more books, more webinars, more consultants, more, you know, just give me all the information to absorb and, you know, witness the people I'm working for and or leading throughout my career. That's just one way, but you know, the change I see, going back to the coaching comment I had said earlier, I think that's where the magic is for me, when somebody is showing up for themselves and want to improve and to get better and pull in, you know, be free to be and free to act, if you will, with all those tools that you're provided or you've absorbed over your time, tried on for size, failed miserably or not, and just learn from that. But you know, to me, I like that evolution, and I've seen it within myself. I've seen it within, you know, companies I've worked for, LeaderSharp Group today with our company. Great evolution on people taking the tools of the past to just transform and know that you don't have all the answers. And you know, so I think it makes me think of ego, you know, which we all have. And sometimes it gets in the way. You know, if you can recognize it when it shows up, that's step one. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, great, thank you. And it's I mean, it's all tied into where we're going in this conversation as well. So I think you're planting some good seeds for us as we continue the conversation. And one of the things that I've really witnessed in the last sort of 10, even 20 years, being in the workforce and doing the work that I do, is seeing this shift from a very sort of, I would even call it, old way of thinking about what is a leader. This command, direct, dictate, very masculine focused leadership, or what we used to think, being masculine was, and how that's really shifted into recognizing that there is a softer side to leadership that is more effective for leading people and sustainably leading people towards a future that is bright. And so what I mean by that is seeing the shift of even who we would see in positions of leadership. That is shifting. I don't think it's shifting fast enough, but it is shifting, and seeing how it really is becoming more of a servant leadership approach. And that's a big shift, right? So even thinking about the kinds of leaders that I've had, the bosses that I've had, mentors that I've had, and seeing that the ones that really had the most impact on me were not in it for themselves. They were really in it because they had this care and this passion about leaving things better than how they found them, right? And so again, that servant-based leadership, I'm sure people have heard that term before, and that doesn't take anything away from being driven, focused on strategy, focused on outcome. But if you combine that with care for people and care for a greater cause, that's where we have this like winning combination. That's where we're really seeing people that sign up and say, I want to work for that person. I want to be led by that person. I'm inspired by them. And you can see the greater impact that they have, not just on a community, but even globally. One of the things that part of the reason that I am an associate with LeaderSharp Group, as you mentioned, is because they have this commitment to creating better leaders in the world. They have this commitment to just that we all need better leaders out there. That's really what our world is needing right now. And I every single day I think about that, and how am I helping to build those people? How am I helping to build those communities? Because that is what we need moving forward. So what I want to move us into is thinking about how those old ways of developing and growing others isn't working anymore. So again, the adding of more skills and tools, reading more books isn't effective. We've reached a plateau in terms of seeing the outcome of that investment. So I'll just skip through a couple of slides, but what I want to say about this slide is tied to the complexities that leaders are facing today. And you may have heard the term VUCA before, so that volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environment that is not going away. That is the way our world is now, and how those are influencing us as leaders and organizations is that we must match that rate of change, that rate of VUCA, with our investment into organizational learning and development. What that does not mean, and what we're recognizing is not effective, and I cannot tell you the number of times I've been brought into conversation with HR leaders, people who are managing change, managing development in an organization, and they say, we have already invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into developing our people. We are not seeing the return on that investment. We spend money on a learning platform, we bring in speakers, we tell people to read this book. So why are we not seeing the change in our culture and the effectiveness on our leaders in the way that we would expect? Well, so here's my response to that every single time is with this analogy of you keep filling up a cup, but there's a limit to how much that cup can receive. So Tyler, what happens if we just keep pouring water into this cup? What's going to happen?
Just overflow, overwhelmed, can't handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a capacity issue here. There's only so much water you can pour into this cup. Eventually it'll spill over. Eventually it'll run onto the floor. And what you see behind is just waste. So organizations are rightfully so frustrated with their investment because they keep thinking about, well, we just keep giving you more, giving you more. So why are we not seeing change? Does this look like waste to us? And so my response is, because you're actually developing the wrong thing. What you want to do, and this is tied to the future of leadership, is what we have to do is actually expand the cup. We have to expand leaders' ability to hold more by developing who they are on the inside. So changing that mindset and changing their ability to even receive those skills in that training that is coming with good intent. So we must approach development from a different lens. So we must be developing our leaders from a different perspective. And that's called vertical development. So if you think of skill building as being the horizontal development, vertical development is the increasing capacity for people. And when I see organizations invest in this way and allow people like myself, coaches, to come in and work on the vertical development, they start to see that all the previous investment that they've given in terms of skill now gets integrated and now can be utilized effectively. So it's not all gone to waste. So when we think of vertical development, we can also think about this being a hardware change for people. So not just expanding the cup, but it's like giving a new set of hardware, a new operating system to a computer. So what we've been doing is operating on old systems. So you think about that secondhand laptop that you bought from your Uncle Vic because he didn't need it anymore. And so during COVID, you're like, yeah, I'll take on that extra laptop. I need another one in the house. And you're trying to now run Windows 10 on it. It's not going to run effectively. At some point, you need a new set of hardware. So that's also what vertical development is. And I can tell you that it's not an easy thing to take on. It's often quite scary for people. But it takes a real commitment and a real trust in the fact that I'm trying to run software on a system that cannot handle it anymore. So I have a big question for you, Tyler. And so I'd love for you to share, think about when was the last time, or can you think of a time where in order for you to become who you could be, to be more effective in your leadership, whether that's as a parent, whether that's in the work that you do, when did you need a major hardware upgrade?
I knew there was a big, hairy, scary question coming.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah. I love the question. No matter what I say, I'm still under construction. How's that? Yeah, we all have life-changing moments, I suppose, if you're willing to look or not. I will go back to 2019 when I started to do the work more intentionally on the scary stuff. So when you say something like that, I guess if you have that inner need to always constantly improve, get better. I don't like the good, better world that sometimes the context comes in, whatever that means to me, but it just wasn't enough. So I had to look super deep within myself. I was redoing my purpose, my why, figuring out, my cognitive dissonance, if you will, that I think I always carried around me, and started to really dig into books, dig into others, listen more intently to other leaders, and just continue to absorb, but also really authentically look under the hood myself. I went through a program that I probably solidified the journey I was on about 1.5 years ago, and that really, I realized I was not looking deep enough, and I think my personal ego was getting in the way. But all the things, even from childhood, started to come up. When I was 10, in a certain moment, that life sentence I put in my head that I showed up with, I listened from, before you enter a conversation, you come with your world beliefs, you come with this good, bad, you have this, sometimes this this what's unrecognized runs you type situation, like air to a bird and water to a fish. You don't even know what's happening, but you're listening from that place. I 100% was doing that. And again, I'm still under construction, so too deep, but I definitely looked at the big and scary stuff of how I wound up being. Why do I show up this way? Why do I listen that way? I am not listening. I'm not authentic. I'm not being fair to that other person, because no matter what they say, I've already judged them. And I showed up with that. So it's really hard to get under that hood, and that's where I'm going with it. So for me, there's a lot more there, and the authentic side is really coming up. But integrity, lots of different things come up, and I want to keep talking with you if we're over a fire right now.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing all that, and I love just even your comment that it really is an ongoing process, right? That you're always under construction, and that is the truth. So if you approach leadership development as if there's a finish line, you will always be disappointed, because I can tell you that it's never done. The work is never done, but the work gets easier once you commit to doing it, and once you become less afraid of doing the hard work and less afraid of opening up the hood and looking at the things that are holding you back. And I'm sure you've had the same experience, Tyler, because I definitely lived that myself. That initial opening of the hood was the scariest, because I didn't really want to look at what was under there, and I didn't want anyone else to look at what was under there to see that. But once you do, it's so incredibly freeing, because you recognize, number one, it's not going to kill you. And number two, people aren't going to run away. And if they do, they weren't supposed to stay anyways. And so that recognition of, this will actually allow me to live life more fully, be more effective, make and build better relationships, then becomes less scary to do that work. So before I share a bit of my own story, I'd love to hear just, Tyler, what are you seeing as the impact because of that work, that commitment to looking at the hard stuff and approaching it differently?
I'm going to say the big aha for me is I show up more as an empty vessel in relationships, in conversations like this. I took out a lot of the thinking. I know some of us, we try to figure out how we think, why we think, where we come from, going back to that dissonance I was referring to, that some of us, it's just unrecognized. It really impacted me in a way. I was overthinking almost every situation. Even last night as a hockey coach, I felt it show up, and I had to, at least I recognized that trigger in myself. But the big takeaway from that question would be showing up with all the tools that I know I've worked on, that are available to me, that I know I can pull out at any moment, whatever the moment requires, and show up for myself and that person. The biggest thing I can share is that empty vessel comment, where I'm not coming with, an already listening type conversation.
Yeah. And how important that is, if you, again, no matter what kind of leader you are, no matter who you are leading, if we don't show up with full receptivity, if we already have a belief about how it should be and how it will go, and that you already have the right answer, well, we've just cut off all of this, number one, ideas coming in, opportunities for innovation and new ways of thinking, but we've also detached ourselves from other people. And so people can't lean in, they can't connect with us if we've already decided that there's no space for them to lean in anyways, right? If we already know, then we've cut off all possibility of what could be.
100%.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's people listening and watching this that can absolutely relate to that. And again, there's no judgment around the fact that, this is a lifelong process. And so just the fact that you can say that even last night, you noticed that it was showing up for you, you can recognize those triggers, and then you can choose differently, or even give yourself grace in the fact that you're still trying. Right? I think that's such an important thing for leaders to recognize as well, is that the goal is not perfection. The goal is how quickly do you recover How quickly can you step back into the place of, I know that I can do this better. I'm going to give myself grace around that. I might even tell the people in the room, hey, I just noticed this showed up for me. Now I'm going to choose differently.
I love the word grace. I think a lot of us, that if you're hard on yourself, definitely pumping the brakes and giving yourself grace is important. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely. And I, you know, the piece around grace was something I had to learn myself. And so I would, you know, when I think back to a major hardware upgrade for myself, that was end of 2017, early 2018. And what I noticed was that I was hitting this wall in terms of how my business was growing, how I was connecting with people, my relationships. And I could feel this, like, the sense of, I know there's more, but I keep hitting this wall. And what am I doing that's getting in the way of things feeling like they're in flow? And it really felt like everything was really hard. And one of the things, I had some feedback from someone. I was working with a coach at the time, and she had some pretty harsh feedback for me. And I'm so grateful for it. And while it was hard to hear at the time, she pointed out that I really struggled with transparency. And so that was interesting feedback. And so people who know me now are, you know, would say that's really quite surprising to hear, that they would see me as somebody who was honest and open and transparent. But the truth was that I only was in very calculated ways. And what I was doing was, when I recognized why I was doing that, was because I was protecting myself. I was worried about people seeing things about me and making a judgment about me that they maybe not like, that they maybe wouldn't see me in the same light that I really wanted them to see me in. I could preach authenticity. I could create a space for people to be absolutely who they are. And yet I wouldn't fully do that myself.
wow.
And so I had to think about and do the work around, well, why? Like, where does this belief come from? Or what is the belief that's reinforcing this behavior of holding back just enough? And so when I looked at it and I really looked under the hood, it had to do a lot with, you know, things that happened in terms of how I was raised, and even just beliefs that were reinforced around, you're only really successful if you do it on your own. You're only really successful if you never ask for help. And that was, it hadn't gotten in the way until that point in my life. And so I think it's fascinating to even work with leaders to recognize that at some point it served you. That belief that was driving, or that hardware that you were utilizing, got you to this place in time, and it's no longer effective. So now it's you have to choose whether you're going to keep using that operating system or you're going to use a new one. And so it took a lot of work around vulnerability, and it took a lot of courage to say, actually, I'm going to choose to be more transparent now. And that was not overnight work. It's definitely not done, but I have absolutely seen my business expand. I've seen my ability to influence others in a positive way expand. I've seen my relationships become deeper and more connected than they were, 5 years ago. So, again, for the people who are listening in, I'm sure you can relate to that too. And what we want you to start to think about, and we've got a bit of an exercise for you here, is to answer this question.
Thank you for sharing that in front of the group.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's incredible, and congrats on that work. And I love that you have a coach. You're a coach that has a coach, and you're obviously willing to do the work, and that is just incredible. That's a great share. Thanks for being vulnerable of where you went from and where you are today and how it's helped.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Appreciate that. So here's another way to, instead of talking about what's the hardware upgrade that you need and what's the new software that you need, it's really asking the same question: what old beliefs are limiting your effectiveness as a leader? And this may not just be a 2-minute reflection for you. I really do encourage you, and Tyler and I encourage you to take this away and reflect on it more. Whether you have a coach now, or that's somebody that you want to engage with, whether you can talk to a friend or a colleague about this as well. To answer this question is an incredible piece of information that can help you move forward. What old beliefs are limiting your effectiveness as a leader? So what we'd like you to do, you can engage with us by answering this question on menti.com. And so that link is in the chat for you, and you need to put in the code here, 36738461. So this is anonymous, but we'd love to hear your feedback in terms of what old beliefs are limiting your effectiveness as a leader. Just going to give you another minute or two. I'll just stop sharing for a minute so we can check in on that poll.
You'll capture everything on your end?
Yeah, so I'll just keep tracking that on my side. I can see as results come in, we've got 3 people who have already entered some information, so that's great. We appreciate that. I will share my screen in just a minute. Just give people a chance to add more. There's lots of great stuff coming in. And absolutely, there's never just one response to this question. Like when you start to look, I think about opening up the closet, that closet that you always sort of keep putting things into, but you never organize it or never take out the things that aren't needed anymore. This is like opening the closet door and you kind of go, oh shit, there's lots in here. Maybe it's time to clean out the closet. So I see lots of great words coming up. Thanks everybody for putting those comments in. So what I'm going to do actually is start to share that with you because there's such great stuff here. You're going to see this come up as a word cloud. Look at all these great words that are showing up. This is great, everybody. All right. Let's just take a minute to look at these. And people can keep adding information in, keep answering that question if you like, as we're talking through this. And so, Tyler, I'm curious about your thoughts here too, but when I look at this list, there's not too many that I can't relate to be honest. At some point in time, Nikki, you're nodding too. This is part of being human. And what I love about this is there's power just in the fact that we can share this and recognize that we're not alone in our ways of thinking and the things that hold us back.
100%. And, you know, you see some of the words here, it just makes me think of this gets to that vulnerable side. Like we can't get there in the time we have today, but you know, the perception we have of when we're a leader of where we want to look good.
Mm-hmm.
We have to look good. We can't look like, you know, we don't know what it is we're talking about, or in a particular moment you don't have the answer, and it's okay. You know, that's a limiting belief sometimes, is that desire to look good.
Yeah.
And I think that jumps out to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I had a lot of that years ago for sure. You know, just didn't want to admit I didn't hear what was said, or I didn't know what was asked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as a coach, my next question is, well, what would happen if you didn't?
Yeah.
So what would happen if you didn't look good?
Yeah. It doesn't matter now. But back then it was the scariest thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was going to be ostracized from that particular group. And
that's just it, right? That's it. You just hit it right there, Tyler, is the fear of being ostracized, the fear of being on the outside. What if we don't belong? What if we don't have anybody? That's the motivator for continuing to, you know, believe that we need to look good or have all the answers or be perfect. We can't fail. It's understanding what's lying beneath those drivers, that then we can say, we can question them and decide, well, do I need a new way of thinking? Do I need to challenge those old beliefs and those old drivers for myself? How can I create an environment where I feel safe to actually fail, where I know that I won't be ostracized? Who do I need to surround myself with so that isn't, you know, influencing me and having this grip on me every single day I show up to work, or when I'm at home with my kids, or I'm coaching a team. And so just imagine what it would be like to do the work around these things that are holding you back. And these are all within your mind. That's the thing that's so fascinating, is that we may be able to point at things that have influenced that way of thinking or shifted or molded that mindset, but it's actually just all inside our minds. So if we commit to doing that work to shift our mindset and do that work, it's like opening up the curtains, it's like opening up the gates. It creates so much more space and freedom to actually just be and show up fully as who we are without things that are holding us back or tethering us to the past. So I get so excited talking about that because I've seen it time and time again where the amount of energy that a leader can actually put into building and growing and moving towards the future, there's nothing holding that back anymore. So if you can do that internal work, just imagine what's possible for what you can create.
Do you think, Erin, on that note, that most people are capable of authentically looking, going back to that word authentic, or do they need the guidance of whether it's yourself or somebody else, like somebody beyond themselves to help them get there?
I think it's a great question. And I think, it's really is case by case. One, it depends on your level of self-awareness. We can only see certain parts of ourselves. And so sometimes a coach or even a counselor or another mentor can say, here's what I'm noticing about you. Here's how you're actually showing up. Because there is a difference between how we intend to show up and how we actually are showing up. So sometimes we need that objective view and somebody who can be really honest with us and not collude with us to say, here's how you're actually showing up. And is this the way you want to continue to show up? So a coach, somebody can help with that. Absolutely. Some people do have great awareness around like, hey, I notice that this is happening. I can think through and reflect on why I might be behaving this way. But then where they struggle is the accountability to make that change, the accountability to hold yourself to doing the hard work, to having the hard conversations, to changing the way that you've structured your life and the way that you're thinking. And that's where a coach can be really powerful, is on the accountability side.
Sounds like a muscle we all have that we have to keep working.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. We're going to do one more poll here, another exercise. And because I want to move our conversation into talking about leadership mindset and those emotionally strong, emotionally intelligent leaders and why they're so effective. So we're going to just move into this next piece. And obviously we could keep talking about this for a long time. So just bear with me as I bring that up for you again. So thanks for participating, everybody. That was fantastic to see that. So we're going to give you another mentee poll here. And I want you to answer this question honestly. So what you think is the real answer here. What is the greatest predictor of success? So you're at that same mentee link. You should be able to use that same code. It should move you to the next screen. And that is, what is the greatest predictor of success? Make sure that that's on the right one for you. Okay, so me some results come in and I'll share that with you in just a moment.
Excellent.
Great, we've got quite a few people that have already participated in the poll, and I'll share those results in just a second.
We'll come to the top of the hour here in 6 minutes. So any of you that need to sign off at the 60-minute mark, please do so. You'll get a recording, you'll get your CPD, but we're definitely going to continue, which we thought would happen. So we do have that 90-minute window. We'll just keep rolling, and I see the chat is getting active, which is great too. So thanks for the participation.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, I'll just give another 10 seconds here for people to participate if they'd like to in that poll. And I'll share the results with you. Okay, so greatest predictor of success. And I'm going to give you the source for this in just a minute. So you can see we've got 16 people who responded, said EQ, and absolutely EQ. So emotional intelligence is the greatest predictor of success. There's some fascinating studies out there that prove this to be right. Past results. So yes, it is a great predictor of success, but the greatest predictor of success is someone's emotional intelligence. And so I'm just going to go back to the slides here. So I can show you some of those statistics. And before I tell you why those statistics are in fact true, I want to tell you a little bit about emotional intelligence. So I'm sure you've heard the term before, but really, what does it mean? So the definition that I use most often in my work as a practitioner is emotional intelligence is your ability to accurately read the environment in a situation and then respond appropriately. So that all seems very simple, but how often do we misinterpret the environment? First off, we make assumptions, we take out information that we think is obsolete because it doesn't matter to us. And so then we create this story about what's actually happening, which may not be true. So just that alone is very difficult for humans to do. And then secondly is if we don't have a good idea of what's really going on in the environment, we then respond inappropriately to it, or we can't manage our reaction to it. So think of the times where, as a leader, maybe even as a coach, you've had somebody on the field that is like not doing the thing that you told them to do. And your first thought is, they don't respect me. Mm-hmm. So then the story we build and the response we have to they don't respect me is very different than they couldn't hear me. So if we think that someone doesn't respect us, how might we respond? So Tyler, how might you respond if you think that someone doesn't respect you?
Past drive future comes up in my head where I'm not listening. I am definitely not authentically listening in that moment. And there's something that's triggering me to prevent me from really giving them space. Mm-hmm. And so respect that hits home with me for sure. And whether it's personally, professionally, if I sense, then there's a bit of that I don't know, ontological perceptual constraint, I'll call it, that I learned that I had. Yeah. So, when I think of, if I make up the story that if my kids don't do the thing that I ask them to do, and they don't, it's because they don't respect me, mm-hmm. My reactive behavior around that is I might raise my voice. I might try to control them more of like, well, if you don't do the thing I told you to do, then I'm going to make this happen. Or now you only get to do this in your day because you didn't respect me. When all of that had nothing to do with disrespect, right? So when we actually think about, what drives kids and why they behave the way that they do, it's rarely about respect, right? It's just about having their own needs met. So think about that in the workplace too. So how might you react to an employee, a coworker, if you have this belief of they don't respect me? You might withhold, you might judge them, you might try to control them, you might even gossip about them. So we have all these reactive behaviors based on misinterpreting the environment. Mm-hmm. So where I want us to move into is even thinking about, well, again, why is emotional intelligence so important for leaders? So I think this is fascinating. This 40-year study of PhDs at UC Berkeley found that EQ was 4 times more powerful than IQ in predicting success. And I can show you study after study at these major universities that prove this to be true. Because really, leadership is about people. If we can't be with people effectively, even if we have an incredibly high IQ, but if we can't relate to people, we can't connect with people, we can't lead people. That's what emotional intelligence allows us to do. Love that. And I'll move through these fairly quickly because I'm also conscious of time, and I know there's some questions there in the Q&A.
And so this next one, 90% of top performing employees score high on EQ compared to just 20% of low performers. So it's not just about being able to do your job well, it's about being able to relate to others, connect with others, influence others. That's what creates high performers. Employees who had managers with high EQ were 4 times less likely to leave than those who had managers with low EQ. Turnover, retention, recruitment is a huge issue for employers right now. People leave because they have terrible managers. People stay because they have great managers and great leaders. It's not about pay. That's not the #1 reason that people leave or move jobs. It's because they don't have great leaders. Managers with highly developed EQ skills surpass yearly revenue targets by 15 to 20%. Those are incredibly high numbers. Leadership is about people. It's not just about numbers.
Love it.
All right, so on that path of thinking, I love this quote. I love this work by Ruth Wegeman. And she says, the day of the heroic leader is over. We must combine people to solve problems. And as such, leadership is now a collaborative function. Leadership is not about the single person. Leadership is about the collective. Our world is too complex, too interconnected. It's moving at a rate of change that we cannot keep up with unless we do it together. Leadership is about people. Leadership is about the collective. So, Tyler, you know that I was going to ask you a question around this one. I love Formula One. I think it's a fascinating study into teams and performance and leadership. Who is the leader on a Formula One team?
I love it. I get it now. And it, you know, if I look at myself in the cockpit there, it's the entire team collectively. And to your theme of what you're getting to right now, that's the new age of leadership, collective, and everybody in their own conscious way to a shared vision, shared goal, working together. And yeah, I love it. I didn't know there was that many people in an F1 pit stop, but perhaps I'll pay more attention next time. But in this case, all 21 are a part of this team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's not just about the driver. They're not the only leader part of this team. It's not just about the GM or the pit crew leader. It's about the collective leadership, and that's what makes these teams, these organizations incredibly successful. It's leaning in together and working together, recognizing how we can be better together. That's what creates success. So to wrap us up, and I think we're right on time here, this feels like a good pace for us, is I want you to think about people who are out there listening, it's still on the call with us today, is it starts with you. So thinking about what is getting in the way of me showing up fully so that I can engage in the collective leadership. What's holding me back? What assumptions do I make? What old beliefs are actually clouding my ability to see the environment and other people for who they really are and what it really is? Because then we can respond appropriately. Then we can create together. Then we're not tethered to old things from the past that are holding us back from creating a better future for everyone. So there's so many resources out there. Tyler, do you have a comment?
No, I love that. I completely agree. And man, I wish we had more time. And again, we're beside a fire chat with everybody in the audience right now, because I think we'd have probably 2 more hours to go. But on that note, I want to get some of the questions out, unless you want to wrap up with anything else, Erin.
Just to say, I'm happy to jump into the questions. And just one thing I will say is if there's any 2 resources, and we'll send this out in the newsletter after, if there's 2 resources here I want you to look at first. Speed of trust. It begins with trust. You cannot build teams, you cannot build influence with people unless there's trust. I love The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. as well as mastering leadership. So they are on the forefront of developing vertical leadership within organizations. So the book Mastering Leadership is one I'd recommend. Absolutely. So those are the two I'll put out there now. We'll put that in the newsletter as well in the future. I'm going to turn off the share screen now. And would love to hear any questions that have come through.
2 more books. Just love those names. Can't wait to read them. Thank you for sharing. Where did I just lost? Sorry. Okay, first question. How do you deal with a leader that has little or no EQ?
It's a fantastic question. And I even just like the language around how do you deal with them, right? So because we can't change other people, we can only influence them. When I have people ask me that same question, my question is, well, what does it trigger in you? What do you notice shows up for you when this person seems to lack awareness or what appears to be lack of care for people? What shows up in you first? How do you react or respond to that? And so again, it always is an inside game first. And then once they've done that reflection on, well, what shows up for me when I notice that this leader is maybe lacking emotional intelligence? And then my next request of them is, what's the awareness that you could bring to them from a place of, I'm here to support and help you too. So what I mean by that is, how can you have a conversation with that leader to say, here's what I'm noticing about how you're showing up, and here's the impact it has on me and the rest of the team. So it's a gift to bring that awareness to somebody, but you cannot be attached to the outcome. You cannot control whether they use that, push it away, or decide that they're actually going to take it on and it's the greatest gift that they ever could have received. You have no control over that. But you as a leader, you get to stand in this place of, am I doing this because I want to help? Or am I doing this because I don't like how I feel when they behave this way?
Oh, I love that. And well said on leading yourself. I think going back to just the nature of what we're discussing here today, leadership, it starts with you. And in that situation, going back to even what you said with respect, that word wasn't even said in that example. That person gave it birth based on their thinking and whatever it meant to them and affected them. I like that. So good. Very good. Are there any assessments you can take to learn what your EQ is?
Yes. And they're not all created equal. But I think as long as it gives you a sense of awareness, then I think there's some great assessments out there. So I'm going to send this out in the newsletter as well. CIQ is a great one. I'd say it's one of the best ones that's out there. I also use one called EIQ 2.0. So it breaks it down just as Daniel Goleman does. So he's one of the people that have brought EIQ or EQ into the forefront of workplace culture. He's not the creator of emotional intelligence, but he has done a fantastic job bringing it into our mainstream culture. And so that assessment breaks it down into awareness of self, awareness of others, management of self, management of others. And when you do that assessment as a 360, so meaning that you're going to get feedback from people who work with you and interact with you on all different levels, that is the most powerful data that you can receive. So you can do a lot of these assessments and evaluate self. It's going to give you some data, but again, we have a limit in terms of how accurately we see ourselves and the impact we have on the people around us. So if you can get that direct feedback from a 360, how are you actually showing up in the world? How are you actually impacting people? That's the best data that you can receive. So anything that has a 360, and like I said, the EIQ and the CIQ, I think are the best ones out there.
Love it. Got that, Nikki? I want to do that later. Can you comment on your perception of Elon Musk's leadership style? Example, the heroic leader.
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. I have mixed feelings about him. Number one, because I can see that he has great influence. I love that he is different and thinks differently than so many people. And it appears like he's a heroic leader, but we actually don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So that's what I'm always thinking is like this, it can feel really risky, especially, this takeover of Twitter. I think we all have a bit of fear around, well, is he making all these decisions on his own? Or is this actually a collective approach that we just don't get to see? And so that's what I'm really curious about, because I think any one leader who stands alone is dangerous. And from that perspective of, we need input constantly to hear new ideas, to question our thinking, to question where we actually might have limitations in how we're seeing the world or what we haven't considered. And if he's isolated himself and he's an individualistic leader, then I think that could be very dangerous. But we don't know that that's actually what's happening, or that's just the perception that he stands alone.
Got it. Good comments. Thank you.
Yeah, this is an interesting question.
It is, yeah. What if you had a boss that has low EQ? What can you do?
I think that's similar to that first question, right? And so I think even just along the lines of, we can see ourselves as being trapped in a system and not having authority because we haven't been named as the authority. If we don't see ourselves as, if you're not on the executive team, we're not on senior management, then we might just believe that we don't have influence. Well, you absolutely do, by walking the talk, modeling leadership behavior, pointing out and speaking up when something doesn't feel right or look right to you, building awareness for the people around you. You absolutely do have influence, even if you don't have the title.
Well said. Does an emotionally intelligent leader have an ego?
We all have an ego. This is my opinion, and Tyler, please challenge me, and everybody that's listening, don't just take this as gospel here. This is my opinion, is that everyone has an ego. Your ego never actually leaves, but how we can use it to our advantage, because it actually is there to serve us in so many ways. Emotional intelligence means that we have awareness of when our ego is serving us and when it is not. So when it's limiting us, when it's getting in the way of having healthy relationships, when we can actually see that we are driving towards success because it's actually driven by ego. I want to be known for this because I've never felt like I've been enough. That's ego. When I'm striving towards success and being very driven in that way because I ultimately want things to be better for others, including myself, that's not as much about ego.
Right.
That makes sense?
It does.
Yeah.
I like it. I know I've been through this, just reading the question quick. The challenge that happens sometimes where an employee is not willing to tough it out for development growth opportunities and just quits, assuming grass is greener somewhere else. That happens often. I think I've done that. How do you get through that? How do you help somebody through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would even question the language around tough it out. So do you have a belief system that actually says that people should tough it out? And what if it's actually an opportunity to, again, number one, look at self and say, is that what's driving this belief that people should tough it out? And then from the other perspective is to say, have you painted the picture for somebody to say what's possible for them if they do the work? Because again, sometimes we just, well-intended, but we just hand over the book, or we say, do this training, but we don't help paint the picture for why. then we also don't create the environment around them to say, it's going to be tough, but we're in it with you and for the long term. And so this may take time. We recognize that it takes effort and it might not always be easy, but we're in it with you. So organizations often fail to do that. And again, build the picture, bring the environment together that feels like it's safe enough for someone to do the work. And then at the end of the day, we also have to accept that we cannot make anyone do the work if they're not ready for it.
Well said.
So I've definitely had teams come to me, or executives come to me and say, this person needs coaching. Can you coach them? Because here's what we need them to be different, or how we need them to be different. And I go, great, I'm happy to talk to them about that. But if they don't want to do it, then we're not doing this work. So I've turned down contracts or said, call me when they're like, they can call me when they're ready. And if they never call me, then we never do the work. People have to take that first step into committing to do the work. And that is absolutely their right to do that, to decide when they're ready.
Well said. 100% agree. Okay. You have about 10 minutes left here. In a situation where you're a brand new leader to a group, how do you quickly demonstrate you're emotionally intelligent?
Yeah. I mean, I wish that I could talk to this person because I just have questions for them versus answers for them. Yeah. And I love that if you're a new leader that you are asking these questions. But the first thing that comes to mind in terms of response to that is, if you are emotionally intelligent, then just be who you are and people will see that. If you are emotionally intelligent, you're going to show people that you care because you actually do care. You're going to ask good questions. You're going to create connections. You're going to show them that even if a situation is complex and stressful, that you know how to be patient, to ask good questions, stay grounded, because that's part of being emotionally intelligent. So if you are emotionally intelligent, just be who you are. They will recognize that.
I love that. Great advice. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and be patient. New leaders are often so eager to demonstrate that they're good leaders, and it takes time. Trust takes time to build with new teams. And again, stay grounded in the fact that you don't have to prove yourself overnight. Just be who you are and show up that way every day. Yeah.
Do you even have to prove yourself? Or to your point, right? On that note, sorry, I thought I had another question here. Do you believe leaders are born or developed?
I know this is like the age-old question. I think how I want to answer that is that because you can develop your EQ, anyone can grow into being a leader if they choose to be a leader. And then the other piece I want to add on to that is that there is no one way to be a leader. And so it is one of the things that, in our next fireside chat or an opportunity to connect with this group again, is one of the things I love teaching and talking about and having people participate in is all the different styles of leadership, and recognizing that we all have a way of sort of leaning into one style that feels most sort of familiar to us. But there are so many different styles that if we learn how to lean into any one of them, given the right environment, that's when we are incredibly powerful as a leader. So this agility as a leader, instead of putting on this label of, this is who I am, this is how I show up as a leader every single day, versus, again, reading the environment and going, how can I be most effective today? So then I actually need to put on a different badge or a different hat or, a different coat based on what I'm seeing in the environment. So learning how to blend leadership styles based on what you're seeing is so much fun when you learn how to do that. Yeah.
I love it. So a rephrase on the question I asked about the brand new leadership group was, she had meant, I meant you are a leader to a new group, like you're starting a new job.
Okay. I don't know if that changes my answer
I
that much.
don't know either. Yeah. I know
Yeah,
I love the questions because to me, they're leading with curiosity, which is a great place to start.
yeah, fantastic. The other thing that this shows up, so I'd really encourage you to read The Speed of Trust. The person that asked that question is because in there you learn about what are the components of trust. So trust is like, I mean, we all talk about trust being important in every single relationship that we have, but then what is trust? And trust based on this model is about the combination between character and competence. So trust is about who you are, your character. So do you have integrity? Do you have good intent? And then your competence. So can you prove to them that you can perform and achieve results, that you have the right experience and the right knowledge? So when you learn how to demonstrate both character and competence, that's when you build trust with people. So I would encourage you to take a look at that book because that's my absolute favorite model on trust, based on that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Hook me in. Oh, it's posted. Thank you for that, Nikki. One more question from me with respect to the type of teams you work with. What does that consist of? We heard your bio at the start. I read some of that, but just really want to understand the type of organizations, people, and groups you work with.
Yeah. So what I would say, there's no sort of one answer to this other than to say, like, even on my roster right now, I'm working with a tech company, I'm working with a design company, I work with a mining company, I'm working with an airline company. And so what I can say is that even though I would say sort of across industries, there's so many different types of organizations that I'm partnered with right now. People are people. And while we all want to think of ourselves as this like unique snowflake, I can tell you that the problems that organizations are having and teams are having they're so similar, because it really is about being human, learning how to step in fully and be authentic and be the best version of yourself, and then do that with others. And it's incredibly complex, but it's so fun. And so I haven't worked with any team where I thought, well, this doesn't fit because this organization is so different. It really just is about people. So that's what keeps everything so fascinating in the work that I do, is that, it's, it doesn't matter what kind of job they do, what kind of industry they're in. And so I have that pleasure of working in so many different teams right now. And sometimes it really is about the individual leader, and sometimes it's about the collective leadership. And so depending on what they're seeing that they need, and the conversations we have, I might lean in one or other or both, depending on the scope of work.
Thank you for explaining. I suppose there's not a lot of convincing at that point. They see it and they ask for more because they're willing to look. And I'm assuming your brand just builds from that. And I love that you've distanced yourself from situations where somebody's not willing or a team's not willing to go there, and that's just not a right fit for you. That's coming across loud and clear. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah. Real good. And lots of I think that's it. I'm gonna wrap up here in a minute. Lots of aha moments. Got to throw that in, right? Jamie would like that. With respect to the wrap up here, we are taking a break in AHA in December. So next one coming up is January 17th with Janice Anderson on technical accounting and ESG. I think a lot of you are on their newsletters and you'll see updates. It's always posted on our website. But this topic on leadership and how you've articulated your experience and your stories and your shares, Erin, is spot on. And this is why this leadership topic will be always a part of our agenda. There's just so much to it. I'm grateful for your experience and your expertise. And I have a lot of takeaways. I mean, I'm always open to new things, and I have probably an hour's worth of homework this evening that I will do. And I challenge everyone else to look and figure out some things that you might be able to benefit from this session, rather than some of us that, we might read a book and move on and not put it into action. I know I've been guilty of that many, many times. So this is inspiring me not to do that. And I don't know if you have any last words, Erin, but really appreciated your time. And the PowerPoint will be shared in about a week's time, right, Nikki? And all the follow-up would be done and the CPDs will go through.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. I just want to say thank you so much again for, inviting me into the conversation. And I hope this is just one of many that we can continue on, because there is so much here. And I want to say thank you to everybody for participating and being engaged. And that makes the sessions so much richer for us, as presenters. So thank you so much for doing that. Nikki, thank you so much for being on the tech side, being here, keeping us on track too. So I appreciate that. And I want to say, people are absolutely welcome to reach out anytime. I always say, please, if you have questions that you didn't ask today, if you want feedback on something, I'm always open to a conversation. I'm here to support you in whatever way I can. And so again, thank you so much, just to be able to speak about something that I feel so passionate about and feel is really important in our conversations today. So thanks again.
I love it. You'll have your LinkedIn profile, everything on your slides. I know just through experience, you can reach out, and she's a human that will respond and give you time and energy. So please do that if you're encouraged to do so today. Thanks again, Erin.
Great. Thanks.
Appreciate it. See you.